and our participant count is up to 36 now. So Ellen, I'd like to go ahead and do our introductions and get us started here.
Great.
All right. Our meeting is being recorded. All right, let's start out. Welcome to your Skills Lab. My name's Rebecca Sundquist, and I'm a Senior Principal Strategic Consultant with Blackbaud. So this session is about developing Power BI dashboards for RENXT, and we are live and interactive here. Ellen Smith from Conservation International Foundation will be talking through the thought process and development of a Power BI dashboard with an example from her own experience. Now, you're not expected to follow along click for click on your own, though materials to help you reproduce what you see here have been provided in the session details that you clicked through to get into our meeting. So sit back and expect to soak up a lot of key learnings from your peer. We want you to walk away with tips and tricks to help jumpstart your foray into Power BI on RENXT data. Feel free to speak up and ask questions throughout today's session. You can do that by typing into the chat or by raising your hand as one of the reactions in Teams. As your host, I'll try to find a good break to intervene so that we can ask your question at a good stopping point for Ellen. And so right now, all folks should be muted. You have the power to unmute yourselves to ask your question if we take that break to call on you. And if you do have any audiovisual difficulties, please see the chat for the common troubleshooting tips I have pasted in there. And if you're not seeing those in the chat, it would help me if you comment back to me so that I can paste them again. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce today's expert, Ellen Smith, the Director of Systems and Analytics at Conservation International Foundation. Thank you, Ellen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Let me screen share here. So we're today going to go through the build of a Power BI report. There are a lot of pieces, and there is to be very honest, a steep learning curve on BI. So I won't get to teach you everything. By the end, you won't get to go get your data and fabulously make one easy report, but I hope to kind of show you through all of the steps. That was kind of daunting to me when I first started. Some tips and tricks again, and then give you the data files that we use to help you go from there and start building your own reports.
Hey, Ellen, before we get too much further, can you maximize your PowerPoint screen for us?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Okay. So the first thing when Heather and I were talking about this session was talking about like what questions was I trying to answer, what problems was I trying to solve when I started using BI, which was about 2 years ago. So these are the questions that I thought back to that were really what I was struggling with, what I was trying to find a tool to help me do better. We were trying to get everyone to start using Razor's Edge to track our pipeline, to get rid of everyone's Google Sheets and spreadsheets and rogues tracking systems. So that was a big deal for me. And also kind of trying to report on donors, not just revenue. So the built-in insights in Razor's Edge and the reports in database view are going to do a great job for like how much did a campaign bring in, end of story. Like you can do that. If you can't do that in the specific reports, maybe take a look at your coding. But really what we wanted to do was look at some more donor specific that isn't as easily gotten to through the built-in reports. And with this, how are we going to like give people a value add that makes them want to keep up with their data? And how can we not create a whole new system? You can buy reporting tools, but that's putting your data into another place, integrating another system. And BI really met a lot of these needs for me when talking about how to fix the problem of rogue spreadsheets and getting everyone to use one tracker. The BI tables are really great to kind of expound on lists. You can make lists, but you can also include custom fields. You can also include data from other data sources. And then you can also include the link, which was key for me, so users can immediately go in and do their updates. So it's not just looking at a report, it's also interactive and like, I see this status is out of date, so let me go right in and fix it. Also, for how to report on donors, you know, if you, like I said, if you just need the basic campaign, fund, appeal, how much came in, pretty simple to do. But using Power BI I use a set of exports and queries to build my reports. And doing that, I was able to create a gift query that looks at donors the way we look at them. So it looks at only people. It doesn't look at, you know, maybe some rogue organization that gave us $400 for no reason. So let's just look at people. Let's look at soft credits, but let's give both people credit, because all we're looking at is how our donors are engaging with us. We're not doing totals. So I hope that makes sense, but that was really important to me to not have to worry about like adding things up and totaling and is this the amount of money, but this is really like how many of our people gave more this year than last year, how many people are giving at the $1,000 range, things like that, and retention rate. And BI met all of these needs, and you know, it allows you to connect to multiple data sources, which is really cool. So I'm starting to work with finance to see if we can do some recon reports in Power BI and not have to like copy information into either of our systems. You can share BI reports with users that aren't RE users. So we've done that a lot with the pipeline. There are people who don't need to be in RE, but they do need to see what's going on with the proposals coming down the pipeline. And then we can do that in BI, and they don't even need to have an RE account. And then also now it works with the Power Platform, all the great things you're learning about with Power Automate, Power Apps, embedding things in Razor's Edge. It's all integrated with Microsoft. You have all of this already in 365, so it's going to allow you a lot more freedom to grow the system, not just maybe create one report for what you know you need now and then be kind of stuck with going on to the next thing. So when I first started learning this, I learned this through YouTube and a few sites that I found, and I shared them in the slides and in the notes. And it took a long time to have that light bulb moment. So I hope kind of talking through some of these things will help you guys not have to take so long to get to the light bulb moment of really knowing how to use the system. When you're building BI reports, you're going to have two pieces. You're going to have your Power BI desktop, and this is where you're going to build your report, build your data set. We'll talk about that in a minute. So this is where you clean up you put all your data sources in, you clean up your data, you build your measures, which are, you know, formulas, you design your theme. You can build an entire report in desktop, and then once you've finished building it, then you can send it to, you hit publish, and then it sends it up to your cloud. And this is where you can share the reports, embed them, build other dashboards. You'll see whenever you build a report, what you have with it is this little red dot that's a data set. So this is the back end of your report. This is everything we'll go through in this session. And then you have the actual report on top of it. So what you can see here is that I've published this one report. And then from that one report, if you have a really good data set and you have everything that you need in one place, then in the cloud, you can click new report and you can build additional reports with that data set. So when you open that up, it's going to have all of the measures and data cleanups and data sources, all the work that you've done in desktop, and then you can create a new report. And I think it's a really good idea to have what I have here, which is just a template. and then have all of your actual report builds done separately on their own. So whenever you need to make changes to the data set, you can make changes to the data set, and then it will refresh behind all of the other reports. So as far as for Razor's Edge specific, there's two ways you can do it, is to connect the Razor's Edge data to your report. There's a connector, and we've provided the link to the instructions for setting up the connector. And then you can also have, what I do is I use Q. I set up reports, exports, and queries to go through Q at night to the hosted files. And then Flow actually will update I have it in a SharePoint library. So it updates that behind the scenes. The connector is really great because it's, low maintenance. You don't have to do anything. You don't have those extra steps of setting up the queue and setting up the flow. And you do have to make sure that, I have a few checks in place to make sure that my data is not getting hung up in queue. So there's a little bit more work on the export side. But on the connector side, you are limited to what you can use based on the API endpoints. So there are some things that aren't available, and that will be a source of frustration. It's also because there is such a high learning curve on a lot of things like building measures, your formulas, and making the relationships between the data tables and your filters. Having all of your Razor's Edge data put in through the connector can sometimes be a little daunting, making all the relationship connections that you need to make it function. Using a set of CSV files might be simpler in the beginning as you learn the concepts before you switch over to the connector, or you can use both. You can have both. So like I said, I use a set of Q that run overnight. They go to the hosted site, and then there's a flow that will update my SharePoint library from there. That's not good. Okay, so when you're first setting up your data and deciding what data to include, the way you want to think about your setup for all of your data sources is what they call star schema. I have that spelled right. And what star schema has is you have two kinds of data files. You have fact tables, and those are gifts and opportunities, and then you have lookup tables, which are the 6 on the side we're all familiar with. So fact tables are going to be where you're building your active measures, how many gifts, how much average gifts, that's where you get that information from. That's your active source of data. Your lookup tables are going to be where you get the descriptors to build visuals on those metrics. So how many to a fund category, how many by a certain fundraiser, constituents, maybe your primary constituent code is relevant. So you're going to have all of these data sources, all these data sources in tables, and then you link them with an in common field. So this means that, for example, if you use your fund category a lot in a lot of reports, you don't need to export in your gift table. You don't need fund ID and fund category. You only have fund ID in the gift table, and then you link the fund ID to the fund table, and that has all of your data. So any of your attributes, start and ends, goals, all that good stuff. So it really limits the amount of columns you have to have in your fact tables, because you just can link and have all the information you want coming from these other lookup tables. Does anyone have questions yet, Rebecca? Should I stop or keep going?
You're doing fine. I haven't seen anyone raise their hands yet.
Okay, all right. Okay, So we're going to jump in and start working on it, but I wanted to show how many steps there really are before you do get to just building the visuals, making a bar chart or the donut or the table. We're going to start in what's called Power Query, so we'll do that now. Power Query is also available in Excel, and Power Query is amazing. It cleans up data. It's kind of like, you know, it does, I think, what used to be like VBA maybe in Excel. So you do a bunch of steps to data and save it in a file, and then every time you refresh the source, it's going to do all of those steps again. So I used it in BI, but I've also used it a lot in Excel to set up my my OMATIC profiles. So if I get data from Benevity or Network for Good, I can do a bunch of stuff to it in Excel, and it's ready to go into OMATIC, and it's been huge. So Power Query is really great for Excel as well. The first thing you want to do when you have a new report is to go under options, and in the current one, we do not want to auto detect new relationships. Make sure that's set. Okay, so when you open your report, this is going to be your report workspace, and then if you go up to the top where it says transform data, this is going to open your Power Query editor, and this is where you'll do a lot of data cleanup and load your sources. You can see there are so many ways you can load data. You can load data just from, you can do folders and XML and CSV, and you can access databases, all kinds of things from SharePoint. You can just use a web link. You have a lot of options. For purposes of this demo, I'm just going to, I've just loaded all of my files into one Excel sheet. The files I run out of Razor's Edge are all CSVs because they're faster and it doesn't need to be, there's no reason for it to be in Excel. So I'll just select all of these. So normally these would come from, these would be separate CSV files.
And Ellen, I'll point out that these files are available in the zip.
Yes.
That's downloadable from the session details.
So the first thing, and you want to be cognizant of this from the beginning, is really good naming structures and simple naming structures. So make sure that all of your tables are preferably one word. For your queries, you want to name them immediately and don't change them once you've loaded and started building your report. So these are all pretty straightforward. One table that you do use a lot as a lookup table is a date table. So a date table will build all different kinds of date columns for you. I've also included the text for doing this in the notes. So if you do a new source and a blank query, Advanced Editor is going to show you all of your steps. So just delete all of that and paste in the new. Paste in the data from the text file, and then what you want to do here is just enter your start and end dates for the calendar period you want to include, and it also gives you your fiscal month start, and hit invoke. So now, again, you're going to have those relationships. So when you make a relationship between gift date and date on this calendar, you'll be able to use all of these other date related columns instead of having to write really long formulas to try and get at this month, last week, last quarter, whatever you need. So there. Yeah, so you always want to have a date field, and it does give you, we'll do a little bit more with that in the report. So a few notes on data cleanup, what you can do here. What you do want to make sure, it's gonna change the type when it loads the data. It's gonna do a best guess on what kind of data things are. And for example, here it is correct that these are numbers. For any of our ID, constituent ID, appeal ID, any ID fields, I'm going to go up and so you click on it, and then under transform, you can pick what data type. I always make those text, and we do want to replace current because it's guessed at something, and I'm basically saying, no, you're wrong. I want it to be text. So we're going to replace the current one. So that's one thing you want to do, and you want to go through and make sure that that your dates do have this little calendar that's telling you it's reading it as a date. The numbers are going to say whole number, so if that's a number solicited, that would be correct. Overall goal is a currency. Currency is called fixed decimal number, so you want to change that. And we can do the same thing here. So this needs to be text, and this is going to be fixed decimal. One thing I'll note is over here, it's going to show you all of the changes that you make. So if you make a change, it's going to make a line. So what's best to do is make all of one kind of change at one time. So usually waiting till you've done all of the cleanup steps you're going to do, and then rename your columns all at one time, delete all the columns you don't want at one time, and change the type to the correct type all at one time. So those will show in one line each, instead of if you change type, rename, delete, it's going to make 3 lines, and it's kind of hard. This is really nice to keep up with what you've done, what changes you've made. Again, with naming consistency, you're going to have your giving. So campaign ID, you want that to be the same as the link field you're going to use here. So make sure that these are all named the same across your data sources, across your tables. So those are some basic things that you do with cleanup. There's so much you can do to remake the data really once it's loaded. Let's see, for example, one that I do. So here we have rating from opportunities. I have the whole definition of it inside of Razor's Edge because I think it's important to constantly remind people of what each of the ratings means. But here I just want to have the word. I just want high. I don't want all this space taken up with that. So I can do a split column by delimiter. It's going to read it, gives you the standard ones, but it recognizes that there's a dash there. So it will let me split that. I want to, then it also gives you under transform, it's one called trim. So anytime you split columns, there can be empty spaces. So it's good to always just trim the text. And now that I have high, another thing that you can do is you can sort a column by a different column. And obviously high, medium, low is not in alpha order. So I can add a column called rating sort. And so I'm going to say if my rating equals high, then I want to output 1. My rating.
I'm really glad that you're going through this type of example.
Oh,
It's the
good.
kind of thing that can really frustrate a new user because you're like, I just need you to sort.
Right. Yes. The
Right.
sort is that's like I said, I really do hope to, and if you don't remember it all today, someday it will come roaring back to you when you're trying to do things. So yeah, so you can do this. So high, medium, low. With conditional columns, you can output um, a value, and you can also output a different column. So if you wanted to say if the status is this, then output this other column. So you can do either. And then you always want to have else is whatever's next. So, okay. Great. So now let's say that I've done all of the cleanup that I want to do to this. At the very end, I'm going to remove the columns I don't need. Like I said, do it at the end all at one time.
Hey, Ellen, did
Yeah.
you show us how then to set that as the column that's sorting high, medium, low?
Yes, that's in
You
the,
okay.
it's in the, yeah, I will show you. It comes a little later.
Oh,
At
okay.
least where I do it, it comes later.
Thank
We
you.
do it differently. Now we're at the end, so I'm going to remove this column with the explanation. I'm going to change this sort, and any sorts need to be a number. So we have rating sort, and then I'll rename this. I don't want it to have that one, so. See my notes. Another very useful cleanup, or I guess not cleanup, transformation that you can do is you can do merge or append queries. So that means like append. So if you had two different files, like I run GIFs from two different blocks of time differently because sometimes it will, you know, go out on queue if it's too long. So if you have two queries that are exactly the same data and you just want to push them together, you can use append queries, and it will put two queries together. You can do merge query, which is basically like a very easy VLOOKUP, is the way I think of it. So for example, here we have our gift file. I have a constituent ID, but I don't have hold on, I need to fix all these. Okay, so I have the constituent ID, but I don't have a name. So if I wanted to add the donor's name to this file, what I can do is choose merge queries. And I'm going to look at the constituent ID on both, and then hit OK. And now what it does is it's going to give you this breakout, and it's saying like these are all the fields from that other query, and so what do you want to add here? So we can just add name. So now we have the constituent name in the giving query as well. So a lot of these are Razor's Edge files, but I also have a set of tables that I use for things like the rating sort. I have one for gift type. So this is one cleanup. Sometimes it doesn't read the top row as the headers. So if you see the columns, then you just hit this use first row as headers.
Ellen, we had a question in the chat.
Okay.
Can we go back a screen to show where is the constituent name? Oh, I see, Jill. You saw the constituent's name appeared as donor 1415. That would be because Ellen has anonymized the data for us for sharing today.
Yes. Yes. These are very laboriously made up things. So when you see any of the visuals, they are not real data, and so they probably won't make very much sense. So, but yeah, so it just took it. So it would be the name Joe Smith or whatever. I've just given them numbers instead.
That's right.
Is that okay? Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so I make some of my own tables that are helpful for things like sorting or things like grouping. The gift type is a great one. So I just keep these in an Excel document called my category charts that I can load in, so I can make changes to the Excel sheet. I can add rows or change descriptions. And it just gives you a lot more room. It's just like the date table, but it does it for other things. So you're going to recognize things here. It's doing the same thing that WebView does when it asks you committed revenue, true or false. So you've created a table here that says, like, if it's this gift type, it is committed. If it's not, it's not. So, and I can make as many as I need for purposes of those upgrades and retention. I have one called donor summary because there are things I want to include and things I don't. And instead of having to like rehash them every single time I build a measure, all I have to do is link this gift type table to my giving by the gift type. And then I can say, you know, I want total giving that is donor summary equals yes. So it allows you to do save yourself a lot of work and set things up so other people can't change them. So
Ellen, along those lines of saving work downstream, Sandy was asking about how this becomes an automated process. So we're only setting this up one time because once we publish this data source to the Power BI service and we start refreshing from the service, it will be walking through all of these steps each time the import refreshes. So what we see on the right-hand side with those applied steps, we've got many applied steps for each of these data sources. All of those run in the appropriate order on the service on a schedule.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do a really good job doing this one time, and it's going to do it for you every time without any. You can set up the refresh to run as often as you'd like it to as well. Yeah, so I do that for gift types. I also do for status. I've found, like, you know, this is another one where I have a couple of different ways I want to look at opportunity statuses. Like maybe for some like higher level executives, they don't care about the difference between accepted and negotiations, but that's very important for the everyday user. So here I can kind of build a chart that has like, okay, sometimes I want to see my status like this, but sometimes I can look at it on this higher level. And then also I'll show you how to do the sorts when we load. But then you can also set up sorts for each one of them. So they're always going to come in the order that you want them to show up in. Okay. Close this one. I have a magic one that's already been. So the next step then, once you've done all of your transformations, the better word for cleanup is transformations because it's not all cleaning, it's doing a lot to it. You're going to load it into your report, and then the next step will be your relationships. So relationships are these arrows are what's creating the relationships between your tables. Relationships there's a lot to relationships. I've included a link to a video that's like an hour long. Also in the training site that I use, Enterprise DNA, he has a really good video on relationships in the beginner class that I believe the entire beginner class for DAX and BI is free. So I feel like I understand the concept, but certainly not well enough to teach it. But it's very important how your relationships are set up. There's cardinality, many to one, one to many. Never use many to many is my understanding. And it's going to affect how your data filters once you start building measures and visuals. So it's really important to get them set up right. So you're gonna, from the Power Query, you'll hit close and apply. It's gonna do all the transformations, and then here you are, you're gonna have your data loaded. You have 3 different tabs over here. So this is going to be where you build your visuals. The second tab is your data tab, and it's going to show all of your tables so you can see the tables just like we were looking at before. And then you have your relationship view. So this is going to show you all of your data tables and how you've made them into relationships. It does give you the option. So this first, all tables, it's going to show you everything, and they're usually like all over the place, and you have to go in and out to look at them. You can also do, here you can see a little bit better the star schema.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask you to zoom in there. Thanks.
You can see the schema a little bit better here. So we have the opportunities. So this is our fact table. And then we have the relationships. So we have your fact table should be your one and your one line, so one opportunity per line, and then your fund. Let me say this wrong. One to many. Okay, so there's one line for each fund, and then that fund is going to appear many times on your fact table. So you can see the direction, again, this cardinality, the many to one, which direction they go in, you're feeding all into the fact table. So this is a simple way of looking at it. It can get very complicated. If we have enough time, maybe I'll show you the back end of mine. It's now kind of scary, but you can do each of your fact tables separately here. So you can see, get closer and see in detail instead of trying to do everything on the front table. You can make new tabs and then just drag and drop things here. You can also tell it add related tables, so you can see everything that's related.
So I think it's important to emphasize here that it's still just one relationship overall, and we're just looking at different slices of it in these tabs that you have the option to on how you create them, which tables you want to zoom in on.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Yes, everything is here, and this is just like zoom in snapshots of the same thing.
Hey, Ellen, there's a really good question here, and maybe you were going to address the date dimension that you created. The question is, does that one date table link to all date fields?
So you can, relationships are going to yell error messages at you all the time. So you can have only one active relationship between tables at any given time. There are ways to manage, you can make several relationships from one table to another. So like in opportunities, if you wanted to have a relationship between date expected, date asked, date funded, you can do that. Only one of them at a time can be active. And then you can still build measures off of the other ones. It's just the way you write the formula is different. It's use relationship is the name of the formula. That makes it possible to use other dates, but you should pick you should pick your one and go with it. And only, I've tried to avoid doing that because I think it makes it confusing, but it is possible if you need to. But you do link. So when you, let me do this part and then I'll get back to that real quick. So the reason we unclicked that box that said auto populate relationships is because it will see these fields that are named the same and it will do it for you. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's really not, because then you have to go through and look at everything very closely and make sure there's nothing wrong. So I just would rather do them myself, and it's easy enough. It's a basic drag and drop. So you click on the column you want here, and then it will highlight it when you drag it to the right place in order to make these connections. Gift date.
And Ellen, did you name that date table calendar in this example?
Yes. Okay. Is it not in the other one?
No, that was just a question that came up. We see calendar on the screen, so that's our date table.
I've gone back and forth. And then the gift type one that we did there. So, okay. So once you have all of your relationships built, like I said, it's an important concept. It's very key to understanding and building good reports. So know that you're going to have to spend some time on that if you get a little bit more in depth. So now we've done relationships. Our next step is going to be our tables. So we'll bounce over from the relationship to this middle one. So this is going to be where all of our tables live. There are extra steps that you can take here to improve your data set. One thing that you'll need to do immediately is you're going to need to mark your calendar or your date table as a date table. So click on it from over here, and then up here it will say mark as date table. And then what it asks you is which column is going to be the date, because you have to have one column that is the main date table. So it's that first one right there. Okay. So also in tables, the other thing you can do here is hide columns that you don't want to appear in your report view. So you can still use them. They'll still pop up like auto populate when you're trying to build formulas. You can still use them. You can see everything still here from this second tab. But when you go into build reports, let's pull this over. You can see like for appeals, I've hidden things that I don't need people to see, that I may use them for building a formula, or we might need them on some back-end filters, but for my users or for when I'm trying to put together visuals, I don't want to have to like dig through all of these columns that aren't important for building visuals. So you can hide them. And the way you hide them is you can right click and then it'll say hide in report view. And then when you go here, they won't show up. If you do want to see them, you can click this view hidden and it will pop them back out, and you can see them for your purposes. But that's better for your end users when they're doing reports. You don't need them to see all of the things, or even not end users, but when you're doing the visual part of the build, like you're only doing the donuts and the bar charts, you don't need to dig through all of that to do your visuals. You can also create custom columns here. So one that I always do for my calendar For the calendar, the same thing with sort. So we run on a July to June fiscal year. So if I were to say I want to sort this, if I sort by the normal month, it's going to sort in the wrong order for us because it's not sorting by fiscal month. So I create a column, it's called a calculated column, to change the fiscal month. And this is in the file that you guys have. So if you need to change, create a column for the fiscal month sort, really what it says, and you'll notice the language that we use to build calculated columns and measures is called DAX. It's similar to Excel, but it's not exactly the same. There's a giant, I don't know where it is, but there's a Bible book to write DAX, but you will recognize it. So this is an if formula, and I say if the month is greater than 6, then I want to subtract 6 from that number. If it's more than 6, then plus 6. And that's going to give me my fiscal month, column. What is that noise? Okay. And then once I have that built, then I can show you, this is where we can start looking at that sort. So I have this fiscal month. I've also made a calculated column for a short month. So you can see what I've done here is a left formula. So it just says left from the month name 3 digits to give myself a month. So now I want to tell this table that this month, this short month, needs to be sorted by this other column, this one that we made for fiscal month. And that's right up here. So you select the column, and then up here it says sort by column, and you select which one you want to sort by. So that way, when I go in, now, it's going to sort the way I needed to sort for our fiscal year instead of alpha order, which it would do with nothing, or January, starting with January if we left it at the calendar year month. So we can do the same with the rating sort. We did the rating sort here in the cleanup. So we'll click on the rating and then sort by rating sort. And that way it will show up as, if we pull in the ratings, it pulls in the right way. And I did do one. I want to be conscious of time. I do have one that I like to do. It's a calculated column in giving, and it's also in your sample file. But I like adding the gift level. So that is a little bit more intense of a formula, but you have it, and you have the table that it builds off of, and then also again you have to sort it to make the giving levels come up. But this is going to say, like, this looks at the gift levels and says if it's between the min and the max, then give us this level, and you can do some nice visuals with your different giving levels. So that's in there, but I don't want to go through it in detail right now. Okay. So you want to hide everything that that you're not going to use, like ID fields you're going to hide. We do want to always build measures, which we'll do next, for any amounts, any numbers and amounts. So you do have amount expected here as a column, but we're not going to use this column to build anything. We're going to create what we call a measure and use that. So you can hide this amount expected because you're going to use the measure. You're not ever going to use this column. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, there has been a little bit of discussion in the chat about the data sources again, and understanding that the calendar query was one that you created using Power Query in the background. There was a little bit of discussion about how even DAX could have been used to create a table on the front side of Power BI desktop. And then there is also some general questions about accessing RE data. And so it might be good to review the connector and the queue method that you use, just another refresher of what you were discussing in those initial connections.
Okay, I can't speak a lot to the connector. I did set it up once. The instructions are very good. When you set up a connector, you can access all of the constituent, I think pretty much all constituent data you could possibly need. And you can also use gift lists to kind of build a specific data set. But I don't know that I would be the best person to answer too many questions about how the connector works.
Yeah, the question was just more generally for a new user who doesn't yet know what they can get back out of RE for reporting purposes, someone who's accustomed to having, direct SQL access. How do they need to change their mindset for how to get data from RE?
I don't know. Again, I don't know about direct access SQL. That's not my wheelhouse. I think that what you should just think about is like, you can get anything you can build an export for is how you can get things out for purposes of building your report. So you're only limited by an export is not really that limiting at all. I will say a few notes on this since we're here already. The opportunities can be really tricky because they're not, for all of you that use opportunities and proposals, they're not real records, so they can be very tricky. So in order to make sure that we have like a lookup field, I set up a flow that adds the system ID as a custom field when the record is created. That way, I think you can see it here. So
okay, for your relating purposes later on.
Exactly. So like, this is really important. I've tried to use the system ID a lot more. This is how I'm able to build this link for that table where I want people to be able to click to get back in. You just need the system ID, which is the number right after opportunities up here. And then I have it create that. And because, if you go through export, it's going to export on a constituent line. You have to use query instead of export for opportunities. I created just a custom field of that ID, and I've included the flow on how to do that. You set it up one time, you don't have to worry about it. So you do have that identifier for your opportunities. And then when you build, and then when you build any query of opportunities, you would just have it, and you would have that identifier down here in your custom fields. So I think that I would need a more specific question.
Okay, well, it was mostly just an overview, since we went through it so quickly at the beginning, how the queue worked generally. And there's some questions about the, so, how does it get to FTP? How did you get it off of FTP? You're using some Power Automate features there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So if under queue, the way I have the queue set up is you can set up a new queue, and you can add exports, queries, reports. So I have the exports that I've created are set up, and they are set up to go to your hosted site. So that's the FTP piece, is that the queue will run overnight and it sends it to your hosted files. So I have those set up. It says weekly, but it does it every night. I have a special user set up that only runs queues. It doesn't run it on mine. And then it's going to send it to your FTP, and then there is a flow. I think we have the link. I talked to Heather about it and make sure it's the right one. There is a flow that will set up an automate to grab your files from your FTP and refresh them at whatever network location you're storing them. So I have mine in a SharePoint library. So you can set that up. You can also do it this way. I have, oh no, wait, no. So if you don't want to set up the flow, or you don't have the things to set up a flow, if you open your hosted files, this is where they all are. So this is all of my BI stuff. So what I've also done before I had the flow set up is I opened the file share, and then you can see here all of my SharePoint libraries from my desktop, and then I just select all and copy and replace, copy and replace.
And Alan, do you find
one manual like that? It takes 3 minutes in the morning as part of your process, but if you open hosted and you have your files on your desktop, you can just drag and drop them from your files as well.
Okay, that was one of the questions here as well, is how much of a pain or how automated is it to download that much data on a regular basis so that Power BI can subsequently import it?
It's not. If you just open your hosted files and then make sure you open one of your file explorers, and that's how I've been doing it, is I just drag it and drop it to the other location. So it is a step, but it doesn't take that long. It's much easier to do it with the connector that does the FTP refresh, but you can also just do it that way as well. And there's a lot of different ways to connect data in BI, so it's not always going to be, it's going to be what your organization has, your security settings, things like that, in order to make that part of it work. And I did have a lot of trial and error trying to get that to work the way I need it to work. But it may not be the same or the easiest for other people. Okay.
All right. We also had one question in here about wanting to review the calendar piece again. Now that the attendees see where the calendar comes into play, it would help to have a little bit of a refresher on how to create a blank query.
Okay, sure.
And there were questions about the parameters in there too. I saw that they just popped up automatically, and actually that's a trick I don't know myself yet. I always just create my parameters manually in my calendar view.
I got so we'll go back into transform data, which will open our Power Query back up. I got this text for this function, for this query from the Enterprise DNA site that I learned so much from. I hope you all check it out because it's really fantastic. But he has it posted there, and it has, it has everything you need in it. And I don't know how it actually works. I mean, you just copy it. You're going to go to new source, blank query. So once you're in the blank query, up here where it says advanced editor, let me show you in a different one. So advanced editor is where it's going to show you all of the steps that you've taken. So it's like the detail behind this applied steps. Advanced editor. It's a different language. This is called M language, which is different than DAX. So it's two new languages. You don't really need to mess with M too much if you stick with the basic transformations. But that's what advanced editor is. So on your blank query, if you open advanced editor, that's why it doesn't say anything, because we just have a blank query, we haven't done anything. So when we paste all of this in, this is like all of these applied steps writing themselves without us going through all of the steps. And like I said, I got this text from someone else, so I don't know how it makes this beautiful enter parameters. I just know he told me to copy and paste it and enter my dates. So once you've done that, just enter the earliest date and then stretch your end date to whenever you need to stop, obviously, the end of fiscal year or 2 fiscal years or whatever. The number of your month start, so mine's 7 because it's July, and then when you hit invoke, then it creates this for you, and you don't ever have to use this again. So I didn't go through this before, but you can organize your queries in here. So if you right click, you can set up groups to organize your queries. And then this function, you can use it as many times as you want. So it's still there. You can make another if for some reason you needed to, but you don't need that one anymore. It's created this calendar, and you can go from here. If for some reason you want to change your dates, we'll do a little advanced editor here. So if you open the advanced editor here, it's just showing you that the source is this other query, and it has your start and end dates. So let's say I decide I'm going to use this for another year. I can change that to 23, and it's going to add all of those dates here. So it's a very cool function, but it was magic that was given to me, shared with me. I didn't create it.
All right, Austin, I'm just seeing your comment here. So, and I haven't read through it yet, but since Ellen took a breath, let's go extemporaneous here. So you're brand new to RE, and you haven't been able to explore it much yet. You noticed that when you set up a query, you pick the source area that the data is coming from. So yes, that's like a record type or a table that we're pulling out of. And one thing you found, you wanted to track an initial pledge all the way through the payment received. And a limitation that you ran into was trying to tie back to the initial pledge date to the payment received line. So certainly in SQL, you can envision how those tables relate. And here in RE query, I personally, Ellen, am not an RE user, so I can't speak specifically to the pledge query and the nodes that are available there. But you should be able to get that initial pledge date side by side with the payment.
Yeah, I don't know that in BI. I mean, I would have to understand what when you say tie the gift, the pledge, because under gift you have you can export your installment schedule, your payments, your pledge balance. So there would be lots of different ways to look at pledge and payments against that pledge, but
And
like,
Ellen, I just got to the too long didn't read section. So the general question is about, I think, the actual relationships in Power Query, how we can use Power Query to do some of that heavy lifting for us. For example, if we have a constituent and their gift data, and if we need to find a quick summary on a constituent level. I know something that I've done in the past is, in this example, take the gift data and use Power Query's mQuery language to aggregate by constituent if I want to get their first gift date or last or a summary. And that way I'm using Power Query to do all the filtering that I need to do and essentially write that SQL group by statement, because group by is one of the features available in Power Query. And then you can use the merge query feature that Ellen demonstrated earlier in the presentation to grab that summary query and put it onto a constituent record. Or if you're trying to summarize your pledge payments and get that balance, you can do that in Power Query and put it on your pledge record. Now, I assume that in RE, some of the queries are designed to already help you do many of those things, but when you need more control over, I just want to write a group by query.
yeah.
Power Query is
Yeah.
a great tool to let you do that off of raw data.
Yeah, I also let's look at the finished one here. So you can do it in Power Query. I actually have that built to do summary, So I have under constituents, I don't want to do any total giving, I don't want to do any fact-based things in constituent, or I want it to be a lookup table, not a fact table. So I do have a constituent. For my constituent, I do include first gift date and first gift information for doing new donor things. You can do what you were talking about in Power Query, but I do it using DAX in BI or in the reporting. What I've done is DAX can build measures. We're not going to get to all of these. So I built a standard group of different DAX measures. So they can be as simple as sum. You can do a percentage. So to goal. So this is a percentage one. So it can make measures. It can also build tables for you. So if you use the DAX measure summarize, summarize will you tell the system. Summarize means, okay, I want to take, I want to take a table. So then the first part of the summarize is giving. So I'm going to take my giving table. That's all my gifts. And I want to summarize it by constituent. So that's going to take the giving, so all of the gifts, and then it's going to make a new table that is one line per every constituent ID. So now you've made it into a donor table. And then it allows you to create measure fields. So then I can say, and I want to include a field that shows how much they gave in FY20 and how much they gave in FY21. So I can write those measures with calculate. And then it gives me, this is the table. It actually, you can see this little calculator next to this table, that means it's a calculated table. So it just made this table. And I told it I wanted, you know, how much it gave in 21 and 20. And then you can also add on additional calculated columns. So here I said, like, I want to grab from the constituent table the first gift date. And from that, then I'm able to write additional calculated columns to say, like, is this a retained, upgrade, new, whatever, based on an if statement from this summarized table. So the reason I mean, I'm sure I could do it. You can do it in the same thing in Power Query. I think the reason I did it here was because I do a special, like, for these giving totals. It's not everything. It's based on one of those gift type groups that I showed earlier. It's based on this donor summary. So I first write a measure that says calculate the total giving where the donor summary equals yes. And then I use that to write my donor summary total givings. Good.
All right, folks, if I've missed any questions here, go ahead and raise your hand, because we did have quite a bit of comments that I might not have kept up with all the questions you want to ask.
Yeah, so we're in measures then, and this is a picture of the book. You can get it. It's cost what a textbook costs, but I use it all the time, and it really helps you. Like, you'll read, there's so many different measures that you can build, and you'll read it and it will inspire ideas of, like, oh, with this I can look at this metric. So I thought the book was worth it. And then also a link to the guys that are, like, the people that wrote this book, their website. That's really really good. I do also create a separate table for measures. So after you've done all your relationships and you've done all your added columns, calculated columns, hidden columns, and you're ready to do measures, if you hit this button up here that says enter data, and just enter like a 1 or something in here, it just creates a place, an empty table where you can keep all of your measures in one place. And I think that that's really helpful, instead of having them spread throughout where the tables they belong to. And when you go to build a measure, just make sure you're clicked into your into the table we just created, and then up here you're going to say new measure. So, and if we just start looking at, like, gift count, it's just like Excel. So if you type in a few letters, it's going to show you everything that's available. And once you enter it and hit tab, it will tell you what it's for, and then it will also, like, tell you what goes in next. So it has to be a column name. So if we wanted, let's just do, so rows, it's going to count all the rows of a table. Once you've created a measure, up here in measure tools, you can format it correctly. So this is gifts, so I wouldn't want any decimal places, and I would want a comma. If you're doing giving, select currency. I always put 0 on decimal points for the reports so it looks cleaner. Over here, it's going to tell you what the table it lives in, and you can move it if you'd like, and the name. So I have a bunch that I did in the example. Summarize the year to date, last year to date. So these are really good for, you know, looking at, like here I have giving year to date, last year to date, and you change the fiscal year based on the calendar to look at different time periods, and it does do just to last year to date, which is so helpful. And that's all written out for you in the formulas. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you, in order to get that the links to get back to things in RE, if you just open any opportunity and copy the address, you can create a calculated column, and you just do link, and you're just going to stick it the system ID column that we have in between all of the web language. So this is going to match up with your system, and plop that 5 digits in the middle. And for links, you also need to choose from this data category up here. Most things are uncategorized. These categories are for like building maps and things, but you do want to make sure that you turn that into a web URL. And that way, if you include it in a report, it's going to treat it like a URL, and also you can go under values URL icon, and it'll turn it into the little linky.
I know I've used that one. I mean, I'm a CRM user myself, but I use that to link directly to pages and records.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to get into the habit for gifts, opportunities, and constituents to start using the system ID instead of, I don't use constituent ID at all anymore, but I was using import ID. Unless you customize your import ID, the last 5 digits will be the system ID. So you can use import ID and just have that extra step of just using the last, I think it's 5 digits. But I've tried to start using the system ID because that is how you create any of the links back to, I did for opportunities, but it would be the same for gifts, the same for people. It's a change to start using that different identifier, but it's much more useful in this situation. So here I just did a few. I think I am at the same time think that the visual building is my least favorite because I'm not an artsy or colory or shapes person, so I have a hard time doing the visuals. They're trying for me instead of doing the data. But I also think it's the simplest part. If you've done all of this well, if you've built really good measures, if you've cleaned up your data, if your relationships are in a good place, then this is the fun part of just like, you know, choosing your your visuals. When you do a few things that I have learned about visuals. So anytime you're clicked on something, this little paint roller is going to be where you do all the formatting for your visuals. On tables, you can do conditional formatting, which is really cool. If you want to take a look at that, you can change if something's less than a number, you can add an icon, change the color, that kind of thing. So those are the conditional formatting is pretty cool. More questions? I feel like
there was another question that I didn't find a good time to interject, and we're at 9 minutes remaining here, so we could have a casual conversation. This one was about how do you handle pledge balances in a donor summary? So if someone needs to get all cash plus stock plus the pledge balance in a donor summary, what do you have queries where you've had to address this type of cash and commitments query?
No, I haven't really. I mean, I haven't really done reports. I mean, in BI, I've done more like it wouldn't be like looking for how much any single person still owes. So, like I might have outstanding. I guess you could do like, I mean, if you had the pledge balance exported on your gift query, you could do a measure for, this is how much is outstanding. For donor summary though, I mean, to me, it's not really, I mean, I look at it for opportunities line by line, like looking at detail, but not really people. So the donor summary is more about getting to these upgrade downgrades, not really looking at someone specific and like summarizing a person's, like not looking for Joe Smith and how much does Joe Smith owe, but like summarizing in order to get to how many people are upgrading and downgrading. So I don't know that I would think about whether BI was the right place for some of that data. But if you are looking at it like a bigger level, like how much do we have outstanding for our scholarship fund, I would use the pledge balance field for that.
Thanks. And then do you have some general tips for those who are really just getting started? So I've dropped a couple of links into the chat here for the Guy in a Cube YouTube channel. I mean, that's where I learned most everything from the start. Yeah. And then also the Enterprise DNA courses that you mentioned earlier. Any other advice for how to get started?
I would be very patient and not hard on yourself. Be very kind to yourself because this is a lot to learn. And it has, like I said, I struggled with it for a very long time. And then there was kind of a moment where it made sense to me, where a lot of light bulbs clicked. So be very kind and patient because it is worth it. Once you just have like a moment where I think, at least for me, where a lot of things kind of fell into place. Those two resources are amazing. There are other people on YouTube that do a lot of Power BI. The guys that wrote the DAX book, they have YouTube videos that are really helpful. But I think what I would say is make sure that you look for things that are like questions or insights you're trying to get for your donors, because Power BI is a reporting tool. So you don't want to use it for like, how much do we need to ask, Sue for, like more of like this kind of like metrics, visual based kinds of things that you can't do with the insights. I think is really, really important. And and to start with like maybe a question that you're trying to answer that you'd like to answer and try and get to that instead of being like, how much stuff can we fit into this report? Like, what is like one thing I want to be able to do? Like, I really wanted to do the upgrade, downgrade, and retention thing. That was important to me. So a lot of what I was doing was, focused on getting that kind of stuff. I also wanted to replace trackers. Like, I wanted people to stop using Google Sheets. So that was like my goal. So I think it's important to have a goal and not just think that it's a system you can just learn to make everything. Like, pick something that you want to do and work towards that thing instead of being like, all of the things. I want, we're going to look at all of the things. Pick something, pick a goal to get to. And
That's
I think,
some really good advice to keep to achieve something.
exactly. Like, don't just try and create a report. Like, try to achieve something that you've been looking to do and you can't. And I think expanding on lists. So for me, it was opportunities, but expanding on lists and giving yourself more, customize abilities to customize. But really, that's the list. That's what it is a really good way to get people engaged. Those are the things I would, and keep it simple at first. Don't set yourself on a like really like high difficulty thing.
With only 2 minutes left or in our time, there was also a question about how the data gets published. And so I've dropped a link into the chat referencing again the Power BI service where the dashboards would be published up to. And then I think it's important to mention that Power BI is a Microsoft product that requires Microsoft licensing. And there are different licensing models that you can research on the Microsoft site. But if your organization is one that already has a high level of Microsoft relationship with such as E5, Office 365 licensing, then your users might already have access to view Power BI, or there might need to be a distribution of Microsoft licenses that come with a monthly cost. There's also an enterprise level and a capacity level, and all of these have nonprofit discounts available through Microsoft. So it is, if you're not yet all in with Microsoft, then there's some work to be done to develop that relationship so that your users can get licensed, and then you would manage security access to these dashboards through the Microsoft accounts and Active Directory, setting up who has access to the workspace, I assume, is how you're managing which users have access to view these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to the end of our time here. We're getting a lot of great feedback. Thank you all for your kind comments here at the end.
Thank you.